So hi and welcome today to the first in our inaugural series called Quick Bites. My name is Jody Margolis. I'm the Registered Dietitian Nutritionist for UCI's campus, working with the student population at both the Student Health Center as well as with the Center for Student Wellness and Health Promotion. And today's program on plant-based milks is part of my role at the Center for Student Wellness and Health Promotion as the nutrition programs manager. And what I've decided to do with this Quick Bite series is to pick some hot topics that seem to come up a lot, not only in the media and the public, but with the students I work with. Some of the areas that they often have questions or interests in. So for this quarter, weeks 3, week 5, week 7, today is plant-based milk, but we'll be doing alternative meats on week 5 at the same time. And then for week 7, we will be doing mindful eating versus emotional eating. So we'll be sharing this video today on YouTube so that people who miss it can also join us and watch. But consumer demand for alternatives to dairy has really been on the rise. It's been on the rise for several years now. And I think with the ever expanding array of plant-based milk products out there, it's become pretty confusing for consumers to make informed decisions. So what I hope to achieve today is just to be able to help you to know if you want to try or keep a variety of different milks, non-dairy based milks in your cupboard, in your refrigerator, how can I best utilize those? And so a little bit about our Center for Student Wellness and Health Promotion. We have a couple different areas of focus. Of course, mine is nutrition and also body image. We have sexual and relationship health. We have emotional well-being, alcohol and other drugs, as well as wellness. And we offer individual consultations in those topic areas, as well as workshops like I'm doing today. And then some services. Some of our services are closed right now while our physical office space is closed, but hopefully one day soon when we reopen, you can come visit us and join and utilize our wellness room. We have a condom co-op where we offer free condoms. Right now, while we're in a virtual time of providing services and workshops remotely, I hope that you can join our social media and follow us, UCI Student Wellness. We're offering things like Meditation Mondays. We're going to do a body talk series. We're doing my Quick Bite series. We're doing things like Behind Happy Faces, which is emotional well-being, pet therapy Thursdays, just a whole array of programs. So please follow us on social media. And so I think we should start with dairy milk so that there's an understanding when we're looking at the non-dairy plant-based milks, how they compare, because oftentimes what I find is my students are making a straight up substitution and dropping dairy milk for a plant-based milk. So I think we should do a little bit of a comparison and some of the qualities in dairy milk are that it is a naturally nutrient dense beverage to drink. It's affordable, and we'll look at price comparison between dairy milk and non-dairy milks, but I know my students are often looking for affordability. It's a pretty simple single ingredient food. It's milk. The only time usually any other things are added to it would be in the case of vitamin A and D fortification, or I suppose if you were drinking chocolate milk, then they would be adding sugar and cocoa and things like that. But otherwise, milk is just a very simple, natural single ingredient food. And it's a balanced source of carbohydrate, protein, fat, and then many micronutrients, including vitamins and minerals. Now, 1 cup of 2% milk, and I'm going kind of middle of the road because those over the age of 2 don't need whole milk. So the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests whole milk from age 1 to age 2. But after that, in the US, the American Heart Association also recommends low-fat milk. Whole milk provides a lot of saturated fat, which can drive up cholesterol. So when we're looking at 1 cup of low-fat 2% milk, it's a good source of calories, 122 calories. And I want you to think of calories as energy, because often what I find is my students are worried about calories. Just the word itself kind of triggers some fear, like calories are bad, but calories are not bad. Calories are energy. And where we get our calories from and how nutrient dense that food is makes a big difference. So you can think of something like chips, potato chips. Yeah, they have a lot of calories, but it's not a nutrient dense food. It doesn't offer a lot of vitamins and minerals and fiber and things like this. So we're not just looking at calories, but we're looking at the overall kind of nutrient density of this food. So it has about 122 calories. It's a good source of calcium, 300 milligrams. For men and women age 19 to 50, you need 1,000 milligrams of calcium a day. That's the daily recommended intake of calcium. So right here, you can see how a glass of milk provides about 1/3 of your calcium needs. It provides 8 grams of protein, and protein is really important. Protein is not only important for really every cell in our body's process. It plays an important role in metabolism reactions, in immune response. It provides energy, it assists in cellular repair, forms red blood cells. So 8 grams of protein is a nice amount. To give you a sense of comparison, 7 grams of protein is what's in an egg. So a glass of milk has roughly just a little more than eating an egg. It's got 340 milligrams of potassium. Vitamin A and D is added, that's called fortification. And then it also naturally contains B vitamins, magnesium, selenium, zinc, phosphorus, as well as some other trace elements. And that's according to the USDA food composition database. So now, move on over, because there's a lot of increased interest in plant-based milks. And so I think we want to really take into account why are people choosing plant-based milks. The worldwide sales of non-dairy milk alternatives has more than doubled between 2009 and 2015. It reached 21 billion, and it's expected by 2024 to reach about $31 billion in sales. And that's all while consumption of cow's milk is dropping in the United States. Over the last 5 years, up until the statistics I have are from 2013 to 2018, US consumption of dairy milk had dropped by 13%. So I'd like you to take a moment to just think about, if you're choosing a plant-based milk, what is the most important reason or factor for why you're choosing your plant-based milk? Is it because you're allergic to milk? Is it because you're lactose intolerant? If so, obviously there's also lactose-reduced dairy milk, often called Lactaid. Some stores have their own brand as well. Is it because you are following a plant-based diet, maybe vegan or vegetarian, or just trying to be more plant-focused? Is it for health concerns? You've heard that the hormones in milk are bad, or the saturated fat if you're drinking whole milk, or the antibiotic use, can that pass on antibiotic resistance to humans? Maybe environmental causes, because cows take up a lot of land space and produce methane, which isn't good for global warming. Or maybe animal rights and ethics. So, and those are all important reasons to consider when making your consumer decision about milk or non-dairy milks. But let's go ahead and look at how really confusing the refrigerator dairy section's gotten at the market. Because I remember when really the choices were between whole, low-fat, and non-fat milk, and potentially soy milk. Soy milk was started to become used by consumers in the 1950s. So soy milk has been around a long time, and then rice milk kind of after that. But now we've got all these cereal-based milks. So we have oat milk. Oatly's a popular brand. We have rice milk. We have legume-based milk. So that would be your soy milk, and then your pea milk, so a pea protein milk. We have seed-based milks like flax milk and hemp milk. And then we have nut-based milks, almond, cashew, and coconut milk, or really coconut milk beverage, because there is a difference. Coconut milk often comes in a can. It's a much higher fat density. Coconut milk beverage is what's sold. You can see in this picture, the So Delicious organic coconut milk beverage. And that's where they take actually the canned, the richer coconut milk, and they dilute it with a lot of water to give it more of a mouthfeel, a consistency like dairy milk. And it isn't quite as high in that saturated fat as canned coconut milk would be. So if you're like me and you go to the section of the fridge and you look at all these different dairy milks, and you can see this is even internationally, we're seeing this pop up everywhere. There's just so many choices to make, and it is really confusing. So let's look at just some basic facts to think about. 75% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. So after age 5, we do start to lose some of our lactase efficiency, the enzyme that we make. We start making less of it to break down lactose, which is the milk sugar naturally occurring in milk. And when we lose that enzyme's ability, we tend to then get digestive issues when we drink milk. So things like gas, bloating, diarrhea, and it becomes uncomfortable to drink milk. So you can switch to a lactose reduced milk, or you can try a plant-based milk. Certain ethnicities also tend to be more lactose intolerant. So it's just important to notice if you get gastrointestinal symptoms very shortly after you drink dairy milk, you might be lactose intolerant, and it's very simple to figure out if you are. Then you would take away dairy for a few days and see if those symptoms go away. And then you could reintroduce dairy briefly to see if they come right back. And if they do, then you know that you're lactose intolerant. And the option would be, like I said, a plant-based milk or a lactose-reduced milk. Cheese has hard cheeses, hard-aged cheeses have very little lactose in them. And yogurt, because it has some probiotics in it, tend to be better tolerated by those who are lactose intolerant. So you can still enjoy dairy if you are lactose intolerant, but milk and ice cream, soft cheeses might be a bit harder to digest. Osteoporosis rates, surprisingly, are actually lower in parts of the world where there is less dairy consumption, and I find that interesting. Why that is, we aren't exactly sure. And it could be an association. It could be that those are also parts of the world where people are more physically active, or they get their calcium from other food sources, and they get good vitamin D. But it's still, I think, an interesting fact. Bone health depends on overall diet and lifestyle patterns. So I think we often think you need calcium for bone health. Yes, you need adequate calcium for bone health, but you also need vitamin D, and you need a lot of other different components, micronutrients. So we don't want to just narrowly look at just one mineral, let's say like calcium, to think that that infers bone health. It's about being physically active as well. It's about overall diet. Some of the nutrients in dairy, they aren't easily replaced in plant-based milk beverages. So I think it is important to understand what these plant-based milks are and what they aren't relative to dairy milk. That calcium is important for bone health, but also for muscle and nerve function. So if we're gonna limit our dairy consumption, not just milk, but in some of the other dairy-rich foods, we do want to make sure that we're getting those nutrients, calcium, and all the other nutrients that milk would provide us with. And we know children sometimes who are raised without dairy on more plant-based milks sometimes can have growth issues if they're on a low-calorie milk, let's say almond milk, which doesn't offer a lot of calories, energy. We want to make sure it has the amount of energy for kids to grow, as well as for optimal bone health and development. Vitamin D is important, and not just, again, for bone health. Vitamin D is a hormone and it's a vitamin, and it's also important for immune health, nervous system, and muscle function. And luckily, most of these plant-based milks are all fortified with calcium and added vitamin D. So they compare fairly well, but we'll talk about some of the differences. I mentioned to be aware of how much calcium you need, so that you can look at where you're getting your calcium sources from, and are you coming close to meeting that 1,000 milligrams a day. According to Consumer Reports, half of American consumers are confused about plant-based milks and their nutritional profiles. So that's why I wanted to offer this today, is to hopefully make you less confused and give you some knowledge in this area. And that there are a lot of fears about soy-based foods, that it's soy-based foods, soy milk, often genetically modified organism, but you can get a non-GMO soy. So far, there's no evidence that GMOs are harmful for us. But some of the other concerns, plant-based estrogens, phytoestrogens, again, the studies in humans so far show that there is no harm to phytoestrogens, that they're not feminizing. You would have to be drinking really several liters of soy milk a day to have any impact on your sex hormone levels. Breast cancer was a concern with soy because of the phytoestrogen. So far, studies show it either has no effect or actually can reduce risk of breast cancer and other prostate cancer as well. So let's look at some of the options out there and what we should consider. So I say always look at the nutrition facts panel on the back of any product that you're buying. But especially for today, when we're talking about comparing these milks, here's some things that you really would want to consider. Consider protein, because as I said, protein is important. And so if you're trying almond milk or cashew milk or any of the nut-based milks or rice milk, I guess what the takeaway message today is that they have very little to no protein. So if you're a breakfast cereal eater in the morning and that's your go-to breakfast, think about the fact that breakfast cereal is a carbohydrate food. It's usually from rice, corn, wheat, bran. There's usually no protein in breakfast cereal. I think the only cereal I can think of that actually has protein in it is the Kashi brand cereal. And that's mostly because they add soy protein to it. So when you have a bowl of cereal and you add cow's milk, you're adding that 8 grams of protein we mentioned. But if instead you're adding, let's say, almond or cashew or rice milk, you're not getting any protein. So that breakfast becomes a carb-only breakfast, and there's no protein there. So it's not a very balanced breakfast. So when I say that there is room in your fridge for a variety of these milks and non-dairy milks, I also want you to take into account how you use them in what meals. So let's take, for example, if you're eating eggs for breakfast, well, eggs are a rich source of protein. So if you're having eggs and some whole grain toast, you're already getting your protein from your eggs. And so if you enjoy the taste of almond milk, I don't think you have to be concerned that the almond milk isn't giving you any protein, because you've already chosen another protein-rich food. Soy and pea milk, on the other hand, are a good source of protein. They have 8 grams, which is the equivalent to cow's milk. There is some question about the bioavailability of that protein. So cow's milk has all the essential amino acids in its protein. It's a very high biological value. Pea milk also has pretty high biological value protein. Soy milk, we don't have evidence completely of the biological value of that protein. So I can't say for certain if it is the equivalent in cow's milk, but it does have the 8 grams. And so I think that's important, but we do need some more information on that. And then oat milk has 4 grams of protein. So it's kind of in between the nut milks and the soy, cow, or pea milk. When it comes to vitamin and minerals, almost all of the products out there in the marketplace now are fortified or enriched. So fortification means that naturally this food would not include this vitamin or mineral. Enriched means it includes some of the vitamin or mineral, but not enough. And so they've decided to enrich it. So most of these plant-based milks are fortified or enriched with things like calcium, vitamin D, B12. We don't have figures. Something that a lot of these products don't always list on their facts panel are figures on things like phosphorus, zinc, B vitamins, vitamin E, and vitamin K. So we don't have all the facts on these plant-based milks, but most of them do add the calcium and vitamin D. Sometimes they add even more calcium than cow's milk, but they offer a less absorbable form. So I'll give you an example. Calcium carbonate is is probably the best way to fortify these plant-based milks with calcium. It's the most absorbable form of calcium. Tricalcium phosphate is less well absorbed. So you want to read the ingredient list and see if it's adding calcium, which type of calcium is it adding? Is it adding calcium carbonate or is it adding a tricalcium phosphate? I try to aim to buy my plant-based milks with the calcium carbonate as the calcium form. And then another thing to consider are the additives. So to give these plant-based milks a mouthfeel that is similar kind of in thickness to cow's milk, they like to add thickeners, things like carrageenan, which comes from a seaweed, or gums, things like guar gum, or soy lecithin. And there are some preliminary studies with carrageenan that shows some inflammatory properties that could affect things like inflammatory bowel disease. So I prefer to buy plant-based milks that say they are carrageenan free because I don't want to take that risk. And then added sweeteners. So as I said, cow's milk naturally has lactose, which is milk sugar. So anytime you look at a carton of milk, it's going to contain 12 grams of naturally occurring sugar. That doesn't mean it's added sweetness. But with these plant-based milks, oftentimes people don't always like the taste of the unflavored plain. And so they're buying vanilla sweetened or chocolate sweetened. And that has added sugar. And again, that's just more sugar than we need. We know the average US consumer already consumes too much sugar, which is not healthy for our weight and not healthy for overall health. So I would say look for unsweetened varieties. So just to drill home that point, look for no added sugar, look for no artificial sweeteners, look for carrageenan free, and always look for calcium and vitamin D fortified. A couple other things to consider. Dairy milk uses 9 times more land to make a liter of milk than a liter of plant-based milk. So if you're concerned about the environment, then maybe you want to try some of these plant-based milks. You just want to make sure you're getting your nutrition then from some other food sources and that you're following a balanced diet. If you are really worried about the environmental impact of cows, then I think coming from California, which is the majority of where almond trees are grown and processed, is in California, where we often are in cycles of drought and have water issues, that almond milk requires more water than dairy milk for processing. So I think that's also something to consider. And you might also want to consider that eating a handful of almonds offers a lot more nutrition than actually drinking almond milk. Almond milk is more similar to water than milk. So it would probably be better to call it almond flavored water because it doesn't offer much, or almond flavored vitamin water, I guess I would call it. As far as cost, which I know is important to my students, dairy milk is still going to be the most cost effective, and you're going to get the most nutrition, for your pennies. So about 2 cents per fluid ounce. And if we compare that to the plant-based milks, the range is anywhere from about 6 cents to 10 cents per fluid ounce. So it is going to be more expensive. And it's important to look at the price per fluid ounce because you might go to the market and buy a carton of soy milk or almond milk and think, oh, this is cheaper than the gallon of milk. But often those carton sizes are much smaller. So you want to compare apples to apples. So you always want to look at the price per fluid ounce when you're comparing the cost. The shelf life is nice. I'm not going to lie. It's really great to be able to, you know, let's say buy something like the shelf stable soy milk or almond milk and be able to put it in my pantry until I'm ready to actually open it up. And then once I've opened it, I go ahead and keep it in the fridge. But the shelf life is long until you open it. So I have a lot of students who end up telling me they overbuy in dairy, they think they're gonna drink it, and then it expires and they feel like they're wasting their money. So again, I think taking that into account is important. And that pea milk of all of the plant-based milks actually has the lowest water footprint. It's lower than almond milk, and it's smaller carbon footprint than cow's milk. And what I like also is pea milk has adequate protein. So the popular brand of pea milk is Ripple. I haven't tasted pea milk, and we'll have to see with those who are joining us, what of these plant-based milks you've tried and what you think of them, and we can talk about that. And then just some final thoughts about being an informed consumer. I think it's always important at the marketplace to realize food is big business. They're trying to sell you a product. Oftentimes they're trying to convince you that their product might be healthier than something else out there. Always think back to what grows on our earth, what is the most simplest, may be the healthiest. You know, you think about fruits and vegetables and all those things that don't require a food label, that have very limited ingredients. You want to read those labels and ingredient lists. Make sure you can pronounce those foods, that you understand what they are and whether they are healthy or maybe not as good for you. Choose a milk that's best for you, depending on your own lifestyle and dietary needs. And just remember, we don't want to do what's called nutrition reductionism, where we just are looking at a food through the lens of one single nutrient or one single food as a superfood. It's really the overall balance in our diet that we want to be looking at. So if you have any questions, I would love to hear your questions. I would love to be able to answer them for you. So I know we have Goran with us today. So let me stop recording for a minute.